You're tuning into the podcast series We Talk Cyber with Monica, your platform for engaging discussions and expert opinions on all things cyber. For more information, check out monicatalkcyber.com, and let's hop right into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to yet another fantastic episode of We Talk Cyber with Monica. I'm your host Monica Verma. We have amazing guests today. We have amazing episode today. We'll be talking about something very relevant to our industry, to our society. We'll be talking about identity today with our fantastic guest, and then we'll be switching over to our guest right away, and he'll be introducing himself. Hi Per, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hi Monica, and thank you for having me. What can I say? Thank you for the introduction. About myself, I think I should start out with saying what a lot of people know me for already, that I am obsessed with passwords and anything digital security. I am the founder and main organizer of PasswordsCon, which is the world's first and only conference dedicated to passwords and digital authentication that I've been doing since 2010. And I spend my daytime, my real life is being the chief security officer of Nordic Choice Hotels in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland.
Right.
So that's the short edition of me, I think.
Fantastic. Lovely to have you on the podcast show, Per. As I was saying, we'll be talking about identities today. Let's just get right into it. Let's start with, how do you define an identity and why is it important?
Well, definition of identity, an identity is, it can be a person, but an identity can also be a sort of a legal entity like a company or an organization or something like that. So just saying an identity can be different things. Mm-hmm. And identity can be your dog or your cat, or for that matter as well. There are, in my world, there are many interesting facts and also misunderstandings about identities and handling them and how we use them, how we perceive them. There are many interesting issues around that.
Right. So why is it important to maintain identity, or why is an identity important? What purpose does it bring, especially in terms of the digital world that we have today, right? What does this identity provide a benefit for towards the society, towards businesses?
Well, I'm kind of tempted to say that, and this is most definitely not any breaking news to anyone listening to the podcast, but there are criminals in the world that do bad stuff. Right. And that is, I would say, a major reason for why we need identities and we need to maintain them and to protect them. This is a legal aspect, like, did you do it or did someone else do it and blame it on you and your identity, your digital being in our cyber world, so to speak. And then there's also a need to protect your identity so nobody else can abuse your identity. And we need identities to be able to see who did what in a digital world. Mm-hmm. And that is something we probably all know is very difficult, at least sometimes.
Right. And you touch upon a very important topic here in terms of non-repudiation. Very important to know that the person who's saying is what they did is exactly the person who did it, right? And that's where we come with the concept of the non-repudiation, and that's why it's important to have identities in general. And recently, the Verizon DBIR report came out for 2020. If you have looked at the reports from the last years, credential theft has been top 3 in the last 5 years. And you were also on the fact of that, there are criminals, bad people in this world who are stealing identities. So what are the implications? What are the biggest challenges in terms of managing and maintaining digital identities, in terms of authorization, in terms of trust, in terms of privacy, and in terms of legal issues?
Well, a very sort of a simple but also very complex problem is that you don't have one identity online. You have many identities. I'm interested in password research, which again is connected to identities. You have many identities, and for a major part of your digital identities, you have a password or maybe a PIN code, which is also a password, just a bad one. And you can have certificates, digital certificates. You can have hardware or software devices, and maybe you are using Touch ID, Face ID, fingerprint, and so on as well to sort of identify yourself. And since we have so many of them, one of the challenges that I have seen now for the past 20 years, throughout my obsession with this topic, is that I think pretty much all of us, or very close to all of us, you don't actually know how many identities you have, or to make it a bit easier, how many usernames or how many passwords or how many accounts do you have. Mm-hmm. A simple test that I've been doing that you can do with friends and family for yourself as well is ask them this question. I want you to spend a maximum of 10 seconds before you respond to this question. How many online accounts do you have? Go. Look at them, look at their faces and see how they respond. And I can assure you that after 10 seconds, when they respond, you will see from their face that they are basically clueless. And the number they will give you will be, well, it's not going to be a random number, but it's going to be somewhere around 15 to maybe 25, which is where most of my friends and family end up. Mm-hmm. And then I tell them that, well, I don't know if you want to participate in this anymore, but I want you now to spend like an hour, maybe 24 hours or a full week. And every time you think of a new account, oh, I have that account as well. And that old account that I had at university like 7 years ago, it's still there. And I want you to try to spend up to a week compiling that list. And again, I'm pretty sure that list will increase from 20, 25 to somewhere between 50 and 150. Mm-hmm. That is crazy. That is insane in terms of security and privacy, because you are clueless about all the identities you have. And then we say it's very important to protect your identity online. Well, you don't know how many you even have. That is a significant problem today. And this problem is also increasing because we are good at creating new accounts for new services. But Monica, honestly, I have to ask you as well, as the host of this podcast, when was the last time you deleted an account that you no longer use?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. So I do have multiple accounts, and I do have definitely different accounts with different service providers. I use them for different purposes. The reason I have them differently is because not every account serves the same purpose. So I have different levels of security depending on the different types of accounts I have. I mean, actually, I've been using password managers for at least, I would say 12, 15 years. Mm-hmm. It's not that time when I got a password manager app, somebody told me that to use it, because this has become very common in the last years. Obviously, we've been talking about it now using password managers, but it's not something that was like really very well known 15 years ago. But I've had an app that I've been using, and I actually also got my father to use that. So that is one of the success stories that I tell people. But you're right. If it is account that I just use for a non-critical purpose, I probably have them out there, which I never deleted. That is very true. But if it's a critical account that I know I no longer need, I delete them. But then the problem actually comes, which is the next question that I would like to ask you. Even if you find out about your digital footprint and your digital identity, how do you know and ensure that this is actually deleted and that the digital footprint doesn't stay any longer? I don't have a way to. I mean, I can only trust the service provider is doing what they're saying, but how does one confirm? How does one know if my digital footprint is no longer there?
And one of the things that fascinates me in this is that well, how do you know that they actually delete your data after a certain period of time? And one of the things I have found, and maybe I'm not being nice now to sales and marketing people, so be it. But they don't want to delete any people from their customer database, because the number of customers you have is an important number to anyone in sales and marketing. And even if a customer haven't purchased anything, haven't called you, emailed you, responded to anything for 10 years, it's still a registered customer. So the fascinating thing is, I think that a lot of sales and marketing people have yet to realize that people actually die, more or less.
Yeah.
I can exemplify this because Facebook and Google, they have incorporated mechanisms to handle the fact that people die. Facebook has a function where you can say that in case you die, you can assign one or more of your friends on Facebook the right to sort of administer your Facebook page as a memory page. They can't change, they can't post anything, but they get a sort of access rights to sort of maintain that page to remember Monica for a given period of time. Google, they have a little bit different feature, which is inactive account manager, which I have signed up for. And this is sort of like fun to talk about. What are we going to do if you die? But Google has a feature saying that if my account is inactive for a given period of time, like a couple of months or 6 months or a year or something, the visibility of my account will start to fade away. And I can also choose that after like 2 years with absolutely no activity on my account whatsoever, they will delete my account and all associated data. And then again, what is all my associated data? Is that all the pictures are uploaded to Google Maps? Is it my blog posts from 10 years ago, which, some of those are maybe I shouldn't have written and so on. But it's like everything goes, as far as I know. And Facebook and Google are, to the best of my knowledge, two of the very few services I've heard about that seems to have thought about the fact people die. Most other services that I use, I can't find any explanation or any feature allowing me to sort of let other people disable and delete my account or maintain my account if I, for any reason, should disappear or actually pass away.
And you're touching also upon the privacy aspect of maintaining digital identities, right? What digital footprint we leave, what kind of activities we're doing on the internet or online, what kind of data we are leaving there. And do you believe that GDPR to a certain extent will help us and is helping us in this aspect of privacy in terms of my data online? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I most definitely think that GDPR will assist us. I'm sort of, in a way, I'm sad that the EU actually had to create GDPR and put it into law, because it's logical. It should have been in place without having to write it into law. And the fact that it went into law means that somebody didn't do what they should have done. That's my personal opinion on this. And working for a hotel chain, of course, we also have lots of customers from countries all over the world. And in some cases, we might have lots of information about you. In other cases, we have your name and maybe your email or your phone number, and that's basically it. And we have information about credit card transactions you made like a year ago, and that's all, nothing else.
Right.
And there are, issues with this. You said that, you have organized your accounts into, like, let's say, let's make it easy, important and not so important accounts, or, accounts you don't care about. It's an interesting statement, and I'm not going to, again, say there's any wrong with that, but there's something about this even though you don't think your account is important, your account can be of high interest to bad people.
Absolutely.
I have nothing on Facebook, so my Facebook account has absolutely no value, which is wrong. It has no value to me, but to criminals, they would love to get access to all my friends.
Correct.
Send out a message saying, "Hey, I'm stranded in Cyprus in Greece. Somebody stole my cash, my cards, and my passport. Can you please send me like 5,000 Norwegian kroner to this account in, Belarus, because I have a bank account there to help me out."
Correct.
It's a scam that has been used for years already. We know about it. And that way, my account is of high interest to bad people. It has absolutely no value to me.
Very important. Yeah. I agree. And I think the point is also, the aspect there is also about what do you mean by important? Insecurity in general, I'm not a target, or why will somebody hack me, is really not a very smart statement, because you might not be a direct target. You could be either a leverage or a collateral, either of the two. So this will affect you nonetheless. So I totally agree on that. And because yes, you're right, there are so many accounts, it's very difficult to manage. Yeah. And you come to a very good point here as well. And let's look at it from two different perspectives, because we talked a little bit about what does identity mean, why is it important, what are the implications on an individual in terms of their identity. Let's look at it from the identity provider's perspective, right? Authorization, managing, like using single auth for multiple services, OAuth and technologies like that. And in terms of access and control, what are the key challenges you have seen? And what are your recommendations for when people are implementing, managing digital identities for the people?
Well, a practical example is something that we have seen now in Norway over the, I think, past 2 years, 3 years, when the financial super authority of Norway said that, Norwegian banks need to know their customer. I don't know the exact phrasing of that, but it was pretty much like banks need to know their customer. And that can be interpreted. And I do think that a lot of banks, they ask their lawyers, what do they mean by we need to know our customers? And whenever you ask a lawyer such a question, it's going to be expensive and it's going to be complicated, in my opinion. And they sort of ended up with this we have digital identities, and we have something called bank ID in Norway, which is common for all the banks and also governments and insurance companies and both public and private health services also using bank ID. It's amazing. It's really, really good in a way to have a common identity which you can use with all kinds of services in Norway in your digital life. But bank ID will be issued by one bank, which is, usually your primary bank. And when they issue that bank can say, yes, we know you. You have been in our office maybe, or you have been a customer for many years, and now you sign up to get your own bank ID, your digital identity. And then maybe you will change your bank, or you will change your insurance company, or you'll move somewhere else in Norway and get a new doctor that will be handling whatever you need to go to the doctor for. And when you make that move, which is a good thing, we make that move completely digital. You don't have to go to the bank. You don't have to go to the post office or anyone else. It's just like a few clicks online and you have changed banks or whatever you want to change using your bank ID. The problem is that this is a digital identity. Let's say that this is just a file that you can have on a USB memory stick. You can have it on install it in Microsoft Excel for that matter. And when you change your bank, the new bank, they have never seen you. They have never talked to you on the phone. They have never seen a picture of your passport. They don't know what you look like. Nothing of that is stored inside your bank ID. The bank ID, again, is, it's just a file on a memory stick. Now the question is, can your new bank claim that they know you?
Mm-hmm.
And this became an issue in Norway, which Norwegian banks have been working with now for the past couple of years, I think, where they said that, well, we need you to sort of re-identify you. We need you to either send in a picture of yourself and your passport, or we actually need you to come and visit a physical office. Like they still have a few of those physical bank offices where you have to go in, identify yourself with a passport, because
Mm-hmm.
then they can say that, yes, we sort of know you, or at least we have re-identified you. And in a world where you say, we have ID providers who want to provide a single ID that can be used across multiple services in different countries and so on, you have the technical challenges, you have the legal challenges, whether this will be accepted by law in different countries. And you also have this issue with, well, there's a digital identity, and that can be stolen, that can be abused, or there could be a technical mistake, and it's not connected to the physical you, like you could have if you were using biometrics. And even then, things, of course, can go wrong.
Mm-hmm. If these identities are stolen, how or what controls or measures can one put in place to prevent abuse of these identities? Because as I talked to you, like credential theft and data theft and identity theft has become very increasingly increasing in the market in the cybersecurity world, in our world in the last years. What are the key recommendations that you give? Both, first, let's talk about the service providers. What controls and measures can they put in place to ensure that, first of all, it doesn't happen? But if it does happen, is there a way to actually prevent or reduce the consequence of a theft of a digital identity?
Well, there are both the proactive and the proactive before something bad happens, and also the reactive controls. If something happens, how do you handle the situation? Now, in a way, proactively, but also reactively, in my world of passwords, a growing service that have appeared over the past couple of years is credential theft monitoring, which is also very close to the business of doing threat intelligence services. With credential theft monitoring, there are services, there are free services, there are also commercial service providers in this market, where they will essentially look for your identity in, let's say the underground market online, on the dark web, on the underground, to see if your credentials, like your name, your address, your credit card, your email address, your phone number, if that appears in data leaks from known or unknown sources. Mm-hmm. And then they can either give you a heads up, or your employer, as an example, so that you can take the correct measures that you think are needed in this. It's very commonly known with credential theft and in password research that people are reusing the same password across multiple services. Estimates are usually in the range of 50 to 70% of all people are reusing the same password across 2 or more services. So even if you have 100 accounts, chances are pretty big that you have less than 10 unique passwords in total. So what you sign up for, like the Troy Hunt service called Have I Been Pawned, which is free to use, there you sign up saying that if my email address and the corresponding password for some service is been found in a public leak that becomes public, then I get an email saying, hey, your password and your email pair for this particular service in somewhere in cyberspace was just compromised. Mm-hmm. And then it's up to me to do the risk analysis, because, no. On that service, the password I'm using there is the same that I'm using on my online bank in Norway. I mean, God forbid, but if I do, then obviously I need to change my password on my online bank immediately. In my case, fortunately, I can say that I have unique passwords pretty much everywhere. So if one service gets compromised and my credentials are compromised, the bad guys cannot use those compromised credentials, my username, email, and password. They can't use that to gain access to any other service that I'm using. But for the majority of our friends and family and colleagues in Norway or wherever in the world, chances are, the majority of them, chances are very high that those credentials can be used to get into other services as well. Now, you said that for your important accounts, you protect them very good. Maybe you have multi-factor authentication of some sort as well, and you have unique passwords. But I know of way too many people that are reusing the same password across services, no two-factor authentication at all, and they just assume, they don't think that this can be compromised, and they are just not able to see the possible consequences. And even when they do, they still don't want to do anything about it because it's too much trouble. In fact, there was a survey done by Google. They released the results, I think it was earlier this year, or maybe late last year. Google, they produced a plugin for Google Chrome, which would look at the sites you were logging in, and they would sort of look at the email address, the username and the password you were using, and then they would look to see if that username, together with that specific password, already existed in a public database leak for you. And if it was, Google would tell you that you shouldn't be using this username and this password because that is available in a public leak. And the survey that Google did, they looked at, after they told people that this username and password has been compromised, they tried to figure out how many people actually did something about it. And the answer to that question, 1 out of 4 people. 25% did something when they were being told, your house is burning, and 75% didn't do anything.
Yeah, and what do you think is the reason?
And it's like, as you said, there is a difference, and it's a very important difference about how important is an account to you versus how interesting is your account for
someone
the bad
else.
people. Yeah, because
Correct.
To no offense, I do not care about who you are. As far as I know, you're not a billionaire, and if you were, it would be a bit more interesting to hack you. But if I can get into your account in 10 seconds, yeah, I would do it to try to make a buck. But I would also assume that since you're not a billionaire, or maybe not even a millionaire, what do I know? There's no point in trying for days and weeks and months trying to get into your account. But there are 2 ways you can attack and try to get a lot of money. You can go for spear phishing, which is trying to find those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 billionaires in the world who doesn't use two-factor authentication and have really bad passwords, get into their accounts and get their money. Or you can go for the masses and say, well, I'm going to try to hack 100,000 people, and I will only get into, 100 accounts. But in total, I will still be making a lot of money on that.
Correct.
I don't care at all who those people are. And that's
correct.
Also as well that I think is sort of, it's kind of hard to explain to my mom that, Mom, the bad guys, they couldn't care less about who you are.
Correct.
They don't need to know your name. They don't need to know anything about you. They just want your money. You only have 100 Norwegian kroner? Okay, well, that's better than nothing.
Yeah, 1 million people with 100 each.
Even better, yeah.
But, exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, if you can make so much money that it's worth the time and effort to get them, the bad guys will do it. And frankly, in real life, without breaking the law, I will do the same thing. If I can make a quick buck, I will.
So you touched the topic of the issue with the passwords, that people don't have unique passwords on different accounts and different platforms. And obviously, if there is one that gets leaked and there's a breach of that credential, then it affects the different accounts, and these could be different services, right? Now, what is the challenge when we move from passwords to biometrics? If somebody is able to, and this has been done, this is not very difficult, right? Copy my fingerprint, being able to use my fingerprint. I can't change my fingerprint. I mean, I can, but it's not as easy as changing passwords. So, what is the challenge with biometrics in general?
Well, when I mean, biometrics have been around for a long time. I purchased my first fingerprint reader more than 20 years ago. And showed it off to my boss while working at PricewaterhouseCoopers back then. And it was interesting to play around with. It was incredibly slow using RS-232 interface, which most generations have never heard about today. And the challenge of biometrics is it's related to this concept again of like connecting the physical you to an online digital identity. How do you do that? Like passports today are biometric passports. There's a chip inside, and inside that chip there's a picture of you, and also the information that is visible on your passport is also stored inside that chip. And on your passport there's a line of data at the bottom, or 2 lines, and those lines essentially contains the password in order to connect to the chip and extract the picture and the other information from your passport. There's even a free iOS app, an Android app that you can use today to connect to your passport and read out all that data if you just want to do it for the fun of it. And the problem is that even if, DNA is trustworthy, it's the best way we can sort of identify a unique individual today, fingerprint isn't that good anymore. Facial recognition, palm vein recognition, and other ways of identifying you based on biometric identities, in your body. Even though the science is solid, implementing it technically is a challenge, and also the usability is a challenge. It's a fascinating to me, it's a paradox really, that we are creating more and more complex technical solutions in order to make them easier to understand and to use for, everyone. That's a paradox. And I do remember, on this, I do remember a conversation I had once upon a time with Johan Dahlman, the inventor of AES encryption and also the SHA-3 hash algorithm. He passionately told me about the beauty of cryptography, and especially the beauty of simple algorithms, simple security. It is so easy to understand, it's so easy to implement, that the chances of making mistakes, bugs, errors, or design flaws are close to non-existent because the code is so small. And he said, that's beautiful security. It is really good and it's really simple. And I think that sometimes we are taking this in the wrong direction by creating very complex security, and we think that that's a good thing to do. I think that in some cases it's the opposite. And also in this question, again, with merging the real you, the physical you, through DNA or fingerprint or whatever, with a digital identity, I don't think that is the best way to go in every possible case. Bruce Schneier wrote once that one of the problems with biometrics is that if the bad guys really want to get into your office, or they really want to get your money, well, why can't they just kidnap you and cut off a finger, or use a spoon to take out your eye? Oh, there are bad guys that are willing to do that if the reward, monetary reward, is just big enough. And move from, how should I say this? I can just slap you around until you tell me your password, and move into a situation where I will physically need to drag you to your workplace and force your finger onto a fingerprint reader, then I have increased the risk for you as a person of physical harm, and I can still get into the office. Something wrong about this.
Right.
There's something wrong about this. So in some cases, biometrics can be good. In some cases, I think, I'm not going to say we're not going to use it, but I think that we need to do one more risk analysis on this. And this also focuses on the protection of your life and your health, not just money.
Correct. And what you say here is actually the key. It's not that we will not use it, but we have to do the risk analysis. Because talking about biometrics and then talking about merging digital identity with the biological identity, there have already been researchers going on. There are people in Germany that I know, there's a scientist that is working and has these RFID chips that are put into your arm and are used to identify you. So how can you help individuals? What are the kind of risks they need to think of before deciding for going for these kind of merging digital biological identities?
Well, for the risk analysis, there's the traditional risk analysis that focuses on the value for money for the company providing services. There's the risk analysis based on the usability and the chances of getting more sales and more customers in this. And with GDPR, there's also the need for the data privacy impact assessment, the DPIA, which is also important. And I think a lot of companies yet have to do that last one, the data privacy impact assessment. If these data go astray, if they are stolen, if they are being abused in some way, what are the possible consequences for our users, for our colleagues? For that one, I think we still have a lot of work to do. And I think that's maybe one of the things we should do before we move ahead with biometrics today.
Fantastic. Thank you. I would just like to slowly start closing off and ask you for just based on the discussions we have had, what is your one key message around managing identities in general, both digital, biological, and also if they're merging? What would be your key message to our audience?
Well, I think I would just start by asking the entire audience the same question I asked you. How many identities, how many accounts, and how many passwords do you have? And try to put them down on paper. First of all, just make a wild guess in 10 seconds, because that is going to be a wild guess. And then you will try to spend an hour, a day, or maybe even a full week. And I wouldn't be surprised that even after a week, maybe like a month afterwards, you will still suddenly remember, oh, there's that account as well. Because we're not talking about just online accounts. I'm also talking about credit cards, payment cards, physical keys, because a physical key is, in a way, a password as well. It gives you access to something which might be only yours, or maybe it's shared with somebody else. It be the spouse to a house or to work or something like that. So try to make that list. And you will probably be, surprised, and maybe I'll be a little bit scared as well about how many identities you actually have. On that list, it's time to start thinking, do I need all these? And I think that's a pretty good start, which everyone listening to this podcast can and should do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Per. So that was all for today's episode. Thank you so much, Per, for joining the podcast show. It was lovely to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So that was all for today's episode of We Talk Cyber with Monica. I'm your host, Monica Verma, and I'll be back with yet amazing episodes, fantastic guests, and amazing conversations on all things cyber. So continue tuning in. Until then, take care. Thanks for tuning in to We Talk Cyber with Monica. Do not forget to subscribe to We Talk Cyber in your favorite podcast app and YouTube channel, Monica Talk Cyber. Take care and continue tuning in.